Good afternoon, everybody. It's my job to ask questions. That's one of the things Peter Drucker liked to tell his consulting clients, who, of course, were always looking for answers instead. And so I thought it fitting to begin to draw this third global Peter Drucker Forum to a close with a question that's been gnawing at me ever since the conference agenda began taking shape some months ago. Why are so many of the clearly worthwhile aims that we've been talking about over the past 2 days, balancing or better yet integrating profit and social responsibility, fostering a workforce that is deeply fulfilled, fully engaged and highly productive, teaching the next generation of managers not only how to do well but also how to do good, why are these things so incredibly difficult to achieve? Lord knows we've been talking about them for long enough now. There are, for instance, echoes of Mark Kramer's call for creating shared value in Drucker's own landmark book, The Practice of Management, and later in some of Drucker's other works as well. Like Kramer and his co-author Michael Porter, Drucker believes strongly that companies must look for ways to contribute to the larger community while tackling primary business objectives. It is management's responsibility to make whatever is genuinely in the public good become the enterprise's own self-interest, Drucker advised. But that was in 1954, more than half a century ago. Why is this vision taking so long to realize more fully? K.H. Moon, the former CEO of Kimberly, gave a wonderful presentation yesterday on how the consumer products company not only became so successful financially, but also established itself as an important pillar in the Korean community and put itself in position to be an environmental champion. Among the keys for Kimberly, many of them, by the way, based on Mr. Moon having consciously applied Peter Drucker's 40 and 50-year-old wisdom, were these things: being truly people-centered, establishing trust up and down the supply chain, promoting 360-degree innovation, and turning the organization into a hothouse of lifelong learning. But again, Kimberly's phenomenal success begs a question. Why is this company the exception in Korea? And for that matter, around the world? Why don't more businesses, indeed, why don't most businesses behave this way all the time? As for reforming management education, the challenges we're grappling with aren't new there either. It wasn't long after World War II, in fact, that business schools began to focus more and more on quantitative methods and the teaching of management as a science, absent the human dimension that had once stood at the center of the academy's approach. By the late 1970s, as Rakesh Khurana so eloquently told us, our places of higher learning had reached a new low, abandoning the concept of professionalism that, to quote from Rakesh's work, had always rested on combining mastery of specific knowledge with adherence to certain formal or informal codes of conduct, and even more fundamental, to an ideal of service. It's no wonder that Drucker came to liken some of our most elite MBA programs to Fagin's school of pickpockets and prostitutes. Now, more than 6 decades into a problem that's only gotten worse, again, the question remains, why do we think things are suddenly going to change now? Why is it so hard to build institutions that are, well, a little more Drucker-like? There are, as we know, no simple answers to any of this, but I do have a few observations and ultimately what I hope will serve as something of a call to action for each of us. For starters, when it comes to what the forum dubbed the internal side of value creation, many have long struggled with the basics, in particular getting the most out of our people because, let's face it, it's just not easy to maximize joint performance in any organization, especially at a time of great turbulence and rapid change. Drucker was only half joking when he said that most of what we call management consists of making it difficult for people to get their work done. That this is all so tough isn't surprising, really. We've heard over the last couple of days about the wonders of Moore's Law and microprocessors and rocket ships. But reaching such great technological feats is easy compared with figuring out how human beings are wired. Managers, being human, well, most of them anyway, are inherently flawed creatures. So too are those who report to them. We will always be up against this sobering reality, at least as Drucker might say, as long as we're on this side of the pearly gates. As many of our forum speakers articulated, we see these human flaws exposed most plainly at times in our relentless pursuit of profit. But this too is not a recent phenomenon. In the 1950s, General Electric, greatly influenced by the hand of Peter Drucker, told its employees that it would begin to measure 8 results areas, all of them of equal importance. Along with profitability, productivity, market position, and product leadership, GE's then CEO Ralph Cordner added to the list personal development, employee attitudes, public responsibility, and balancing short-range and long-range goals. More than 5 years after these 8 goals were announced, Donald Webb, one of the GE managers responsible for their implementation, wrote a note to his files. This is what it said, and I quote, "The general feeling is that the 8 results areas is all good theory, but when the chips are down and the bosses are actually making a determination affecting their compensation or survival, there will be only one measurement that counts, and it will be the figure at the bottom of their profit and loss statement." That was written in 1957. Since then, as we've been reminded over and over the past 2 days, the pressure to pursue profit above all has grown steadily more immense. Our culture has come to view the marketplace as sacrosanct, perverting the teachings of Adam Smith, as Charles Handy made clear. Shareholder value does continue to trump a broader stakeholder approach at most corporations. What Drucker called the symbol economy, where businessmen play only with numbers, has in many respects eclipsed the real economy. Along the way, some of our sharpest minds have forgotten that ringing up high profits, especially in the short term, doesn't necessarily mean that anything of real value has been produced. It's worth noting in this regard that Lehman Brothers reported record earnings in 2005, 2006, and 2007. By 2008, it had collapsed, bringing to mind Drucker's insight, stupid people make stupid mistakes, brilliant people make brilliant mistakes. These are not forces that one easily brings to heel. Greed is an awfully powerful thing, especially when it's reinforced by armies of well-paid lobbyists. By the end of his life, Drucker was so tired and disgusted by what he was seeing, decrying obscene levels of CEO pay and declaring that, in his words, absolute shareholder sovereignty violates many people's sense of justice, Drucker began turning his attention to the social sector. So what then are we to do? Should we just give up, particularly when you consider how long we've been trying to push for change? Hardly. More than ever, I think we have a real opportunity to do just what the title of the forum suggests, shape the future. It's certainly important to keep things in perspective, as we've been helpfully reminded here. Much of the world is much better off than it was 40 or 50 years ago. There are many, many good models to build on, and we've heard about some of them at GE and Ingersoll Rand and Novartis and elsewhere. We've got to be careful not to over-romanticize the past or demonize the present. And still, it's not hyperbole to say that capitalism really is at a crossroads. Some might even argue pretty convincingly that it's at the edge of a cliff. But that could be just the opportunity we're looking for. People who have otherwise been complacent or apathetic or frozen, they tend to finally act when they feel themselves nearing the edge of a cliff. We see this instinct kicking in now in all sorts of ways, whether it's through the millions of people who read Natsume Iwasaki's novel with its Drucker-like ideals, or the Occupy Wall Street protests, or Rosabeth Moss Kanter's new piece in Harvard Business Review, in which she lays out the case that companies need to view themselves as enduring institutions, not merely money-generating machines. Interestingly, Moss Kanner once accused Peter Drucker of being a utopian for believing the corporation should strive for many of the very same things that she herself is now urging: a common purpose, a long-term view, the emotional engagement of employees, and community building. At the time, Drucker pushed back, saying that he wasn't looking for a utopian society, merely a functioning one. What the financial crisis has laid bare is that Drucker's bedrock philosophy couldn't have been more spot on. We live in a society of organizations. If those organizations are poorly managed or irresponsible, or God forbid, both, society suffers. Communities suffer. Real lives suffer. Many of you have probably heard the expression, people are like tea bags. You don't know how strong they are until you put them in hot water. Well, we're all in a little hot water now. So as more of us seek answers and begin to act, we must remember that there are no shortcuts to take here, especially when it comes to doing right by those inside our organizations. All of us as managers, as leaders, need to rededicate ourselves first and foremost to the fundamentals, to creating a workplace that offers a real sense of dignity and fulfillment to everyone on staff, to pushing authority and responsibility as far down into the organization as possible, to building on people's strengths so that their weaknesses become irrelevant, to creating avenues for growth and the acquisition of new knowledge. K.H. Moon mentioned an old Drucker tool, the manager's letter, as a practical way to move in this direction. My institute recently dusted off the manager's letter, the use of which is explained, by the way, in the practice of management, to help ensure that each of our individual employees' objectives are aligned with the whole of the organization, that the organization is doing all it can to help and not hinder our people in their work, and that ideas are bubbling from the bottom up instead of pouring from the top down. Drucker recommends having employees write a manager's letter to his or her boss once or twice a year. We found it so effective for unleashing the power in our little organization that we've actually taken to using it quarterly. Jack Bergstrand, the author of the Drucker-inspired book, Reinvent Your Enterprise, has devised his own set of tools to help lift knowledge worker productivity. During his breakout session yesterday, he vividly described some ways for everyone across an organization to understand, as he put it, here's where we want to go, and here's how we're going to get there. Others offered all kinds of concrete suggestions. Maybe you want to join the Swiss dialogue, or borrow Peter Gomez's model and create your own, an American dialogue, or an Austrian dialogue, or a Brazilian dialogue, or an Indian dialogue. Maybe you want to go back and tweak the incentive structure in your organization so that you're rewarding people for more than simply hitting the numbers. Maybe this forum has inspired you, as it was suggested, to go take a course somewhere and broaden your understanding of the world. Whatever it is, think about one thing you've learned here over the last 2 days. Take it back to your organization and act on it. Even more than process, though, we need courage. We need the courage to stick to our values and to walk away from any organization, whether it's our own or that of a partner or even a customer, when we see those values being violated. We need the courage to honor Drucker's dictum, above all, do no harm, even when we're being pressed to turn a blind eye. We need the courage to abandon yesterday and to try new things, to innovate, perhaps at the bottom of the pyramid, where there is a great opportunity, in Deepa Prahalad's words, for managers to reimagine their role as agents of change. We need the courage as well to promote shared value in our companies and to make sure that our organizations understand that this is a part of our core business strategy, not some off-to-the-side CSR campaign or a PR gimmick. And when people inside and outside the organization push back and say that this all sounds too quixotic and pie in the sky and moralistic, and undoubtedly some will say those things, be prepared. You think Adrian Woolridge was tough on Mark Kramer? Try advancing this idea before a group of skeptical colleagues inside your organization. Yet try you should. Yes, Peter Drucker laid out the broad concept of shared value 50-plus years ago. And yes, some businesses have always turned social problems into business opportunities. So in one sense, there's nothing new here. But now Kramer and his team are building on this foundation, providing new academic rigor and lots of rich examples, demonstrating tangible results from all across the globe, which show how turning a profit and curing social ills are not only compatible, but mutually reinforcing. By making shared value more explicit, by turning it from something done by default into something done by design, it can accelerate the trend. And maybe, as Mark expressed, turn it from mere glimpses of progress into a real movement. A movement, one can hope, at least as powerful as that of shareholder value. Finally, we need faith. The good news, at least as I see it, is that our young people give us a lot of reason to have faith. And I'm not just talking about the Drucker Challenge winners or the students here from Wake Forest University. They are in many ways symbolic of a whole generation whose members, according to poll after poll, are searching for real meaning in what they do and are more interested in contributing to the common good than any group of young people since the 1930s. Reach out to someone who's young. Teach them. Learn from them. Make sure your organization is responsive to their desire to give back. Please do not harness them. If we want, we can ignore all this. It's easy to hide inside organizations and to ascribe whatever happens to the corporation itself, to the faceless, anonymous enterprise, those glass towers of which Charles Handy spoke. But as Drucker told us, the organization, like every collective, is a legal fiction. It is individuals in the organization who make the decisions and take the actions, which are then ascribed to the institution. So what will you do as an individual in your organization? Richard Stroud began this forum by invoking the challenge that Peter Drucker used to issue to his consulting clients. What will you do different on Monday? We now come full circle. As Richard said, it's getting late on a Friday. But before you leave here, I ask you please to take 2 minutes, literally 2 minutes, and jot down one idea you're going to take back to your office and actually put into practice. Write down when you're going to do this by, right? If you don't give yourself a deadline, it won't happen. And write down one more thing as well. What results do you hope to achieve? For as Drucker liked to say, the joy is in the results. Thank you very much.